Alright, well, in the last video, you posed a question, and you didn't really pose the question, but I posed the question for you because I like to talk a lot. But the question was, you see this gradient that we've added to help kind of give us that nice sky but still keep our original foreground. This was before, and this was after, right? So we added a gradient onto this mask here. Well, the question comes up a lot, alright, well, what about if my horizon line isn't perfectly straight, which in this case, it's not, and you can actually see that the darkening in the sky actually took place over here on the trees as well. Alright, even into the rocks it went. You can see when I turn it back on, see how that area got darker, and I really don't want that. I actually want that to remain brighter from the original layer below. So how do I make this happen? Well, if you're new to masks, this is actually very, very big because you're going to find out you can use a brush on here. You don't just have to use a gradient or something like that. You can use a brush. If you're already familiar with masks, you might already know that. In that case, go ahead and skip this video because that's what you're going to learn. But the way it works is when you look at this little layer mask that comes along with the adjustment layer, it doesn't care about how you get black and white onto this. All it cares about is that it gets black and white. And remember, black was what we did on the bottom to show the layer underneath, which is the original layer. So that means I could take my brush tool, just hit the letter B, or come over here to the toolbox, and I could set my foreground color to black. And now, I'm going to zoom in on this just so we can see it a little bit better, but now I can start to paint on the rocks and in the trees and start to bring back that original layer that was below. Okay? And that helps me get the best of both worlds. Essentially, I can use the gradient to help make it very quick, but then I can come in here and clean things up with the brush. Now, I'm actually being able to be very forgiving here because the tree line is right near some clouds, so it's not picking up the fact that I'm not being perfect. But if it wasn't near clouds and I had to be perfect, you'd have to make your brush very, very small, which I'm using the left bracket key to do that. And you'd have to come up here and get in there and be pretty detailed about it. And that's the way masking works. I mean, sometimes you can get away with a lot. Sometimes you got to get in there and be pretty precise with it. But what it's letting us do here, and I'll probably have to be precise right up there, what it's letting me do now, if you take a look at before and after, that's before and that's after. Let me back off a bit so you can see it. Before and after. Now what I've really done here is I've restricted all the changes to the sky only. It's not bleeding over into the trees or into the rocks. Another little trick for you is if you come over to that mask icon here, if you hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on the PC, and click on it, you can actually see what you've painted on. You can see kind of a close-up version of what the mask looks like, which is, it's kind of cool to learn from, but at the same time, it also lets me come inside here with my black brush, and it lets me just clean up any areas that I might have missed along the side here, because you get a very close view of the mask itself. And to get back to the normal view, just come back over here, hold down your Option key on the Mac or Alt on the PC, and click on it again, and that brings you right back to the regular view. Okay, so that's before and that's after. Now this takes us to another topic, which is I'm going to go ahead and fill this mask with white again. So we're basically at square one. We just added the levels adjustment. Before, after. It's darkening everything in the photo. And earlier I used the gradient. I don't have to use the gradient. I could come over here to my rectangular marquee tool and I could make a selection down here at the bottom, and I could just fill that with black. Just come over here to your toolbox, take your paint bucket tool, set your foreground color to black, and click, and I get kind of the same result. All right, it's not as smooth as a gradient was, but I did that to kind of demonstrate to you exactly why this mask doesn't care about how you get black and white on it. It doesn't care if you use the paint bucket. It doesn't care if you make a selection and fill it, if you use a brush, whatever. All it cares about is black and white. So now I would have to take my brush tool, come back over here, and then just clean things up a little bit. Alright, and one of the things that you can see as I start to do this is if I happen to go over too much, which I did here, and I'm just going to exaggerate it. Let's say I'm painting with a really big brush and then whoop, go straight over, and I made the sky lighter there because I revealed the original sky that was below it. What you can do is just switch your foreground color from black to white. And to do that, just hit the X key. All right, and that switches over here. You can see my foreground is white, and now I'll paint with white, and that brings back. So it's kind of like erasing, but you're not permanently erasing. You're just temporarily erasing, because you can always come back over here onto that mask and just paint with black or paint with white. And the main thing I tell people who ask the question, well, how do I know what black is doing and what white's doing? How do you remember? Honestly, there's only two choices. But you can think of black as black is going to hide whatever's on this layer that the mask is on and show you what's underneath. But if you start painting with something and you don't get the right result, just hit the X key and paint with the other color, because it can only be two different colors. All right, so don't get all caught up on exactly what black and white do. Just understand what this mask is, and that it hides part of the layer that it's on, and it shows whatever's directly underneath it, or it shows whatever's on the layer, just depending on whether you have black or white on it. And now you can take this even one step further. Let's open up the other image for this lesson. I'm going to come up here to my adjustments panel, add a hue saturation, and just drag the saturation all the way over to the left. And now let's say I want to bring that blue hat back, because remember, we had some color underneath here. Let's say I want to bring that blue hat back. I could take my brush tool, set the foreground color over here to black, and now just come inside here and I could paint that blue hat back in. Okay, and you might have seen this done a million times. It's a very popular effect to do this with a bride and her flowers, where the photographer will turn the whole photo into a black and white and then just paint the flowers back in. Or happens a lot of times with portraits. We'll paint some small color object back in. In this case here, I spilled over a little bit too much onto the other hat. Just hit the X key, switch back over to white, and I can just get right back to where I was without the spillover. Okay, but lots of different examples that we can start to use these adjustment layers. You can really take this very, very far, because now you can do targeted adjustments to only certain parts of your photos. And then the next few lessons, when we start to talk about layers and layer masks and everything like that, you're going to see that this really kicks it up a notch when it comes to what you can do with layers inside of Photoshop.